Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. This is Mujib Khazi and you're watching my YouTube channel. In a couple of days, the world will be celebrating 2021 and some of us will forget to reflect back on 2020. COVID-19 have changed the dimensions of our lives. Globally, over 78 million people have been impacted. About 1.7 million people have lost their lives. Just in USA alone, over 18 million people have been impacted by the COVID-19. 326,000 people have lost their lives, and still it's counting. Not realizing that what's happening in those war-torn countries and the regions such as Kashmir, Palestine, and other regions in Middle East where unbiased numbers are not being reported. People have been suffering not only because of the COVID, but internet lockdown, free flow of informations, ban on journalism, and people losing life because they're not being given the very basic necessities of their life, such as medicine. Those who are suffering from the dialysis, the treatment is not available. Kashmir, for the last 500 days, have been deprived. An entire region has been deprived from 3G and 4G internet services. Not realizing how many people are suffering, those who need medical help, but also students, journalists, newspapers. Nowadays, the internet is one of the basic component of our life, and unfortunately that has been taken away from the people of Kashmir alongside of their freedom of press, freedom to hold free and fair assembly where they can raise their voices and show their concerns. When we reflect back on 2020 and move on to our 2021, let's go back and see what other human beings around the globe have faced the challenges. How many people who were alive are no longer with us? How many countries who were independent but they don't have independence anymore? How many people who were with us sharing our dinners and the meals but they are not with us? So that is a reflection for us that if we are living in this world and we want to make this world more harmonious, let's look after each other. Let's take care of the ones who are oppressed. Let's take care of the one whose voices are not being heard and be the voice for those who need our voice. And I'm very honored to have some of my guests speaking about these violations in the world. And here is what they have to say. You and I have talked about it on many occasions and many events about the human rights violations that are taking place in Kashmir. And you were able to collect this data through the scholarly resources and all that. Unfortunately, yesterday was marked 500 days of lockdown and media clampdown in Kashmir by the Indian forces and the human rights violations that are taking place. And, these are the reports that has been reported by the Amnesty International, who were able to get the sources from third party, because the unbiased media and the journalism is not allowed in the valley to go and report these numbers. And that is the most significant human rights issues that include the police and the security forces abuses and extrajudicial killings, forced disappearance and torture, arbitrary arrest and detentions. When we talk about women being killed specifically under the guise of a gendercide, the women are being raped in Kashmir as a weapon of war by the Indian forces as we speak. Young girls are picked up from the age of 13 to 20. And about last time we heard the number was like 20,000, and they have not been reunited with their families. And the young kids have been picked up with, and they've been put into incarceration tents. And it's been at 500 days that the families have not been able to meet their kids. And obviously the pre-trial detention and whatnot. So Kashmir basically is divided into, now actually it's into three pieces. A portion of it is occupied by China, Pakistan, and India. And they have a line of control, and they have an agreement that they will not open the fire on the line of control. Just in 2020, India violated its own agreement. Yesterday, they reported the number 2,999 times. So I would not be surprised that they do it 3,000 times in 1 year. What happened is that once they violate this, because it's an unprovoked firing, and it ends up killing those innocent people who are just going about their normal routine at the border. The houses are being bombed. If you're grazing your animal outside, and the young children and the girls and the women are bombed to death, houses are burned. I mean, this is so painful that every time I talk about it, I just lose my emotions, that how on earth such extreme brutality is taking place and the world is completely at quiet, at silence. And now we have the intelligence reports that, these are the reports coming from the Indian sources, and it's out on the widespread that India is planning a plan to have a war between Pakistan. And we, the people outside, know that all three countries are nuclear powers, and it can be a nuclear flashpoint between all three countries, and that will, spread the war not only in the region but around the world. I just want to have your thoughts on that before we close our program.
Of course. I mean, the human rights atrocities are inexcusable, and so is the violation of the Kashmiris' fundamental right to self-determination. That's a right that's guaranteed in Article 1 of the United Nations Charter. I am absolutely baffled at the lack of response in the West. The Western press has done a very poor job of keeping this issue alive in the news. We focus much more on Hong Kong, where human rights violations are occurring as well. Even the Palestinian conflict gets more attention. I think there are a few reasons for that. I think one, most Americans are so confused by the history of the conflict in Kashmir that they don't know who is right, who has legal title to the land. They don't know if India is acting in its rights or not. So I think there's just they sort of throw up their hands. That's part of it. I think there's also the fact that the United States has such strong business and political ties with India that there is a reluctance to condemn India's actions. I think we can condemn the actions without condemning the people. And I think that that's appropriate. They have a regime now that was voted into power by the people, but they have a regime that has violated precedents in as egregious a way as Trump did here in the United States, and suppressed freedom of the press and harassed journalists and harassed political opponents and obviously Muslims. But I think as Americans, we should condemn the actions. We don't have to condemn the nation or the people, condemn the actions and call for justice.
Thank you.